Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. I'm really excited about this one because I know a lot of you have been sending in this topic. We are going to be talking about seed oils
Okay.
and the idea that they might be impacting our brain health.
Yeah.
You've sent over a bunch of different sources that we're going to be looking at today, including a YouTube video called The $212 billion Food Ingredient Poisoning Your Brain.
Right.
It's from the What I've Learned channel. Have you seen this one?
I have. And it's interesting because it starts off with a pretty bold claim, right?
Yeah.
This idea that something we're eating every day could be linked to things like lower IQ scores.
It's kind of scary when you put it like that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of all those documentaries about environmental toxins and how they can impact our brains. Like, are we just constantly discovering new things that can mess with our cognitive function?
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the whole thing with leaded gasoline.
Oh, yeah.
For years, it was considered completely safe. We were adding it to our fuel without really understanding the long-term consequences, especially for developing brains.
Right.
It just goes to show that our understanding of what's good for us is always evolving.
Okay. That's a really good point. So just because something is widely used or accepted doesn't necessarily mean it's harmless.
Exactly.
Makes you think twice about what you're putting in your body.
It does. And that's why I think this deep dive on seed oils is so important. We need to look at the evidence, understand the potential risks, and then figure out what it means for us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's get into it. So before we get too deep into the whole seed oil thing, I'm curious, like, our brains are amazing. What are those key nutrients that have really fueled brain development?
Well, when we talk about brain power, two essential fatty acids always come up.
Okay.
DHA and AA.
DHA and AA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Docosahexaenoic acid and arachidonic acid.
Oh, wow. You're really testing me on the science terms today.
Just in case you want to impress someone with your knowledge of fatty acids.
I appreciate that. But maybe we could break it down a little bit more. What do those actually do?
Absolutely. So think of DHA like the master architect of your brain cells. It helps build those cells and, even more importantly, the connections between them.
Right.
Those connections are how our brain cells talk to each other. And DHA is crucial for making sure that communication happens smoothly.
So DHA is building the structure. And then what about AA? Where does that come in?
So if DHA is the architect, AA is like the messenger, making sure those brain cells can actually talk to each other effectively.
Okay.
It plays a big role in brain signaling and also how our brains respond to inflammation.
Got it. So it's like a 1-2 punch. You've got DHA building it and then AA helping it run smoothly. So where do we even get these brain-boosting fats naturally?
Well, nature provides. DHA is abundant in fatty fish,
Right.
like salmon, mackerel, tuna. You also find it in things like shellfish and algae.
Okay.
AA, on the other hand, tends to come more from land-based sources. So think meat and eggs.
You know, that actually makes me think of that aquatic ape theory that they mentioned in the video.
Oh,
It's
right.
like one theory about why humans evolved such large brains. Because those early humans who were eating a lot of seafood were getting a ton of DHA.
Exactly. That's
Yep.
the idea. Now, the aquatic ape theory itself is still, up for debate.
Sure.
Not all scientists agree on how much time early humans actually spent in the water.
Right.
But it does highlight an interesting point. The early humans who did eat a lot of seafood, they were getting a significant amount of DHA. And their brains, well, they thrived. It could be one piece of the puzzle of how we develop these complex cognitive abilities.
It's a cool connection. So we've got these essential fats, DHA and AA. They've been crucial for brain development throughout human history. But then things change. Our diets shifted dramatically, and the YouTube video points to seed oils, or more specifically, the linoleic acid in them, as a potential culprit. And it's important to clarify here what we mean by seed oils. We're talking about oils like sunflower, soybean, canola oils that have become very common in a lot of processed foods and that many people use in their kitchens.
Right. It's not that these oils were completely absent from our diets before, but the sheer quantity that we're consuming now is really unprecedented in human history.
The video definitely makes a connection between that increase in linoleic acid and some concerning health trends.
Oh.
And this seems like where things get really interesting. Maybe a little controversial. It feels like that video really struck a nerve with a lot of people.
It's understandable, though, right?
Yeah.
The idea that something as common as cooking oil could have such a big impact on our health. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore. But I'm always a little wary of jumping to conclusions, especially when it comes to health and nutrition.
So what does the research actually say about linoleic acid and how it affects the brain?
Well, that's the right question to be asking. And the video definitely presents a compelling narrative.
Yeah.
And it's true that linoleic acid consumption has gone up a lot. But as we always say, correlation doesn't equal causation.
Right.
Just because we see these two things happening together, increased seed oil consumption and certain health trends, doesn't mean that one is directly causing the other.
Right. There could be other factors at play that we're not even thinking about, or it could be, a complex interaction of different things. It's rarely just one thing in isolation.
Exactly. And to really understand the potential impact of linoleic acid on the brain, we need to look at the mechanisms involved. Like, how might it actually be influencing brain cells and cognitive function?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's one thing to talk about correlations, but getting into the how feels really important here. So what are some of the ways that linoleic acid might actually be impacting our brains on like a cellular level?
So one area of research focuses on inflammation. Linoleic acid, especially when it's consumed in large amounts, can be converted into other fatty acids in the body that are known to increase inflammation. And chronic inflammation, as we're learning more and more, can have a negative effect on brain cells and how well they function.
So it's not that linoleic acid is like toxic in itself, but it's more about how our bodies are processing it.
Right.
And what happens as a result of that, especially when we're consuming it in quantities that are kind of unusual from an evolutionary perspective.
Exactly. And it's not just inflammation. Some studies suggest that too much linoleic acid could also lead to oxidative stress in the brain.
And that makes me think of all the things we already know about protecting our brains as we age, like eating antioxidants, managing stress. It's all about maintaining that balance. And it sounds like maybe excessive linoleic acid could be tipping the scales in the wrong direction.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an area where we need more research. We need studies that look specifically at the long-term effects of high linoleic acid intake on brain health and cognitive function.
It just seems like with a lot of nutrition science, we're still putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
It's just complex. There are so many variables, but even with the unknowns, there are still things we can do right now to take care of our brains.
Absolutely. And that's one of the most empowering things about this whole conversation. You've talked about the potential downsides of consuming too much linoleic acid.
Yeah.
But what if we flip the script? What if we focus on getting more of those brain-boosting fats that we talked about earlier, DHA and AA?
Yeah. Instead of just focusing on what to avoid, what can we add to our diets to really support our brains?
Exactly. So think back to those DHA-rich foods, fatty fish, shellfish, algae. Maybe try incorporating extra serving or two of those into your week.
Okay.
And on the land-based side, don't forget about those pasture-raised meats and eggs, which are good sources of AA.
It's almost like we're looking back at the diets of our ancestors. Those diets that were naturally higher in these brain-supportive fats and lower in things like linoleic acid? It's really interesting to see how modern research is starting to validate some of those ancient practices.
It really is. And it speaks to the power of a holistic view of health. We don't have all the answers when it comes to seed oils and brain health.
Yeah.
But we could still make informed choices based on what we know about supporting brain function and overall well-being.
I love that. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, and I hope it's encouraged all of you listening to take a closer look at your own diets and make choices that support your brain health. Remember, knowledge is power. The more we learn, the better equipped we are to make decisions that really serve us. And until next time, keep those brains fueled and those questions coming.